Rome was built on brilliance, but held together by chains. From its palaces to its blood-soaked roads, an empire stood tall on the backs of the broken. And yet, in all its cruelty, even Rome had limits. This isn't a story about what Rome did to slaves. It's about what it feared to do. Welcome to Echoes of Conflict, Rome's Invisible Army. The Roman Empire, at its height, was home to over 50 million people. More than 1 in every 3 was a slave. They were the invisible machinery behind every temple, market, aqueduct, road, bathhouse, brothel, and battlefield. They weren't just manual labor. They were doctors, teachers, cooks, midwives, gladiators, accountants, lovers, bodyguards. Some were born into chains. Others were taken from defeated tribes, sold by debt-ridden families, or kidnapped by pirates. To be a slave in Rome was not just to lose freedom, it was to lose identity. You were no longer a person, you were a property. What masters could do, and often did. Legally, a Roman master could do almost anything to a slave. The master held complete control, vitae necis potestas, the power of life and death. They could whip a slave for speaking too loudly, rape a slave as a legal right, brand a runaway on the face with an F for fugitivus, sell their children, break their bones, make them fight wild animals for entertainment. There was no privacy, no consent, no recourse. The only protection was the master's mood or market value. Because the truth was, slaves were more protected by price tags than by laws. The shocking laws that limited masters. Despite all this, Rome drew a few lines. Surprising as it may seem, certain things were forbidden. Let's explore what even Rome said you couldn't do to a slave. 1. You couldn't kill a slave without cause. Eventually. For centuries, a Roman master could murder a slave without consequence. But under Emperor Hadrian, 117 to 138 AD, that changed. He banned the execution of slaves without trial or justified reason. Why? Not compassion, reputation, economics, control. Uncontrolled slave killing scared the upper class and caused instability. Hadrian feared mass revolts, so he placed legal brakes on brutality. Killing a slave for no reason? That could get you exiled. 2. You couldn't castrate a slave. Yes, this happened. Castrated male slaves, eunuchs, were often used as household servants in eastern provinces. But under Hadrian, forced castration was banned across the empire. Again, not for moral reasons, but because it was considered barbaric and weakened the male slave's productivity. 3. You couldn't abuse a slave in public. Rome believed in appearances. A master could flog or beat a slave, but doing so in the street? That was frowned upon. If it disturbed the peace, it could lead to social shame or legal complaint. In 173 AD, Emperor Marcus Aurelius declared that extreme cruelty to slaves could justify the transfer of that slave to another master. For Rome, control was everything. Too much violence was just bad management. 4. You couldn't deny a slave religious rights. Slaves often retained their cultural and religious practices. Many worshipped Eastern deities, local gods, or even adopted Roman ones. Rome tolerated this because faith pacified the desperate. Masters who blocked religious rites could be punished not for offending the gods, but for inviting rebellion. 5. You couldn't sell a sick or damaged slave without disclosure. By the Lex Aemilia, sellers were required to disclose illnesses, addictions, or behaviors when selling a slave. Fraudulent sales could result in compensation or reversal. Yes, Rome protected buyers, not slaves.
Why Rome drew lines. These limitations weren't born from compassion. They were tools of power. Rome feared slave uprisings, public backlash, economic collapse, religious unrest. So it invented legal limits to appear civilized while maintaining dominance. Laws were not shields for slaves. They were masks for masters. How masters got around the rules. Even these limited laws were easily ignored or bypassed. Punishment became a justification for murder. Disobedience was used to mask torture. Runaways were maimed or crucified despite reforms. Courts rarely sided with slaves, and no law stopped a master from raping, starving, or psychologically destroying a slave, especially if done behind closed doors. When slaves fought back. Despite the terror, slaves resisted. 1. Spartacus. In 73 BC, a gladiator named Spartacus led 70,000 slaves in a massive rebellion. They defeated Roman forces again and again. It took 2 years and 8 legions to stop them. When the rebellion was crushed, 6,000 slaves were crucified along the Appian Way, a road of death stretching over 130 miles. 2. Everyday rebellion. Poisoned food, runaways, secret literacy, false obedience. Some rebelled quietly, some loudly. Most died doing it. 3. The slave who took her master to court. Rare cases emerged of slaves winning legal cases. One female slave, abused by her owner, was granted freedom by a sympathetic magistrate. But for every one of her, there were 1,000 others left in chains. The path to freedom, or something like it. Slaves could be freed sometimes. Called manumission, it was a status upgrade, not a rebirth. Freed slaves became freed men or freed women. They gained limited rights, often stayed loyal to their former masters, could not hold office, still carried the stigma of slavery. But some became rich merchants, scholars, even parents to senators. Yet they were forever caught between freedom and memory. You may leave the chains, but the scars remain. Slaves who made history. Some names survived. Epictetus, born a slave, became a Stoic philosopher. Phaedrus, a slave who translated Aesop's fables into Latin. Felix, a slave who rose to become a Roman governor. They defied fate, but they were exceptions, not the rule. The empire's forgotten foundation. Narrator, soft, emotional. Rome wrote its laws in stone, but it carved its greatness into flesh. And even in an empire that glorified power, it feared its own reflection. So it wrote limits, not for kindness, but to stop the mirror from cracking. Behind every statue was a slave. Behind every triumph, a scream. And behind every Roman law was a lie that said, "We're better than this." If this story opened your eyes to the silent suffering beneath ancient glory, subscribe to Echoes of Conflict, where we reveal the truths that history tried to bury. Comment below. Was Rome's legal protection of slaves mercy or manipulation? Until next time, remember the echoes left behind in the chains.